In case you're streaming us live on our social media platforms, how about you tag a friend to jump on board? All right, today we're going to talk about sexual harassment at the place of work. Now, the local media has in the recent past been awash with reports of complaints by workers, some of them high profile, about alleged sexual harassment by their superiors. Now, but what is considered as sexual harassment at work? That's the big question that we've never been able to crack. And how does it differ from non-sexual harassment? Can we get some examples? And should you feel like you have been harmed by sexual harassment in the workplace, what are the steps you can take to file a harassment claim? Now, we are joined by Mr. Douglas Opio, the ED of the Federation of Uganda Employers, and also Ms. Rita Atukwasa, the Executive Director of the Institute of Social Transformation, to give us an understanding of this hard nut to crack. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Let's start with describing sexual harassment, because I think it stems from a point of ignorance. At times, you really don't know that, hey, if David touches me a certain way, that can be classified as sexual harassment. So what essentially is sexual harassment? We can start with the lady.
Okay. I think sexual harassment is any act that comes out in a sexual in nature. It could be a touch, it could be a word, it could be written, it could be gestures that are intended to induce somebody to have sex with you. And what seals it is the issue of non-consensual, unwelcome. Because even when somebody goes a step further to say, I do not like what you're trying to do to me, and then you insist, then it goes to another level. It is unwelcome. And we all know what sexual nature acts look like. When somebody just touches you, an innocent touch, you will all know it. And touch that is not innocent, even the one who is extending it will know it.
Correct.
Yeah, for instance, if you're seated in a meeting and somebody is constantly winking their eyes, that signifies different. There are those we know culturally, that there are others that have continually to emerge. You call me, for instance, for a meeting, and you decide to start showing obscene photos, or maybe porn, or anything that suggests. So all that constitutes sexual harassment.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Douglas Opio, your view on this?
Yeah, I think Rita has explained it quite well. It's just unwanted sexual advances. And these unwanted sexual advances can come in various ways, like Rita has explained. And usually the perpetrators are advised, and then they also see sometimes, even when they're not advised, the inconveniences being caused to the other party. And if they persist on that route, then definitely they're harassing the person.
I think the definition of sexual harassment is very wayward. It's not definitive. And
You're right.
I think that explains the reason why many people don't understand what sexual harassment is.
Yeah, you're right.
When you say a sexual touch, what is this sexual touch? When you say a wink or a look, a wink could mean anything.
Yeah, sure.
A touch could mean anything. People's bodies respond differently. When she walks up to work, I could say, hey, good morning, beautiful. And that could be a compliment to her. That could also be sexual harassment. So don't you feel that the definition of sexual harassment is so wayward for anyone to understand, and that's the reason why we're all prone to this?
It would only be qualified to be wayward when you want to take a softer stand. You know, when we are doing things wrong, we certainly know. Look at Samantha. How do you want to say that the definition of all she went through over and over? I even write, I say, no, please stop. I even write and say, please, that I do not want it. How weird or how clear do you want that to be? If you say bodily touch, I mean, what would you be doing? We know our body parts. We know maybe how they react, but you also have a right to the respect and dignity of our bodies. My body has nothing to do with you. Respect it. Why do you want to touch me endlessly?
Right.
For what reason will you want to do that? To extend unnecessary touches to your colleagues, to somebody you find in a taxi, and then you start sitting and you want to put you everything around my arm around you. When do we embrace people? I come from Ankole. When somebody is embracing me for the usual embrace, they know it and I know it. When they are embracing me beyond the usual embrace of greeting and happiness, they know it and I know it.
You know, you did mention the current case that, of course, we are all looking at, Uganda is looking at, and this is the case of Miss Samantha Mwesige, of course, senior state attorney, who has recently come out to say that, you know what, my senior boss has been harassing me sexually. Now, yesterday we did see a group of women addressing the news conference, asking government to take action against sexual harassment at the place of work. Let's take a look so that we can give this conversation some context to it.
Samantha Mwesige's story of harassment has been making ground since September 2018. The senior state attorney's claims point to a Justice Ministry official.
And I told him it is not about that. We work together, and as such, I cannot go into a relationship with you. He got so upset with me, Alex. He threw me out of his office, and so I stayed there, you know, miserable.
Mwesige says that she has been working under immense pressure and decided to seek justice, but in vain.
I went to the IGG first. She too didn't do anything. I then went to the Honorable Prime Minister, who promised to address this issue. And to date, I have not had any redress. It is coming to 10 months.
She has also resorted to speaking to the media so that her tormentor is brought to book. Women activists have thrown their support behind Mwesige, asking her employees to immediately constitute a committee to investigate the matter.
Regulation 11D of the Employment Sexual Harassment Regulations 2012 requires that the Sexual Harassment Committee responds to complaints within 14 days from the date of lodging the complaint and makes recommendations for appropriate action. We have not been given any reasons for the delays.
The women say are disappointed that there have been several cases of this nature and the culprits walk away untouched.
Because if violations like this can happen in an environment that is supposed to be safe, then we can only imagine what's happening in the private spaces, in private enterprises.
They want to use this campaign to fight for the rights of other women. Sexual harassment at workplaces is rampant, but different studies indicate that 90% of the victims never file complaints, which to a certain extent has made it rather difficult to get rid of it. Solomon Kawesa, NTV.
Quite unfortunate it is, you know, and this is a senior state attorney, has gone through this for a decade, maybe plus. You know, and someone would say, if it can happen to her, she is a lawyer. She knows what the law says, and she has lodged complaints. She said that she went to the IGG, went a step further, of course, did, you know, have a conversation with the Prime Minister, but so far, no response. What more is going on for young ladies, you know, in these small offices, quote unquote, that of course is not being brought to light? I think we can have your take.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that sexual harassment is a form of gender-based violence, and there are quite many other forms. But also want to say what was happening yesterday, there were many issues that were highlighted. And to pick from is that sexual harassment or abuses have no boundaries. Rich or poor, work, high level, low level. But of course, when you're more low level, it gets worse. Maybe they will never come out. And you also clearly heard that over 90% do not come out, because what was highlighted yesterday, and we continue to highlight, is that even when the Employment Act provides for sexual harassment, even when there are sexual harassment regulations that should be followed, there are still gaps in implementation. There are gaps in terms of limiting the numbers. It says they should be able, it should be able to be effected if you have 25 and above workers, and that's what you're asking. If you have 2 clerks in your office, what will happen? And also the steps to reporting are not very well stipulated. escalated. And those were some of the key asks that the activists were saying, please government, can you be able to work on this? But above all, if you say the law says please set up a committee within 14 days, it should be clear that that committee has been set up, the meetings have happened, and recommendations or resolutions have been stated. And finally, I also want to say that the regulations provide that the accuser can temporarily be relocated or transferred, which is very absurd. It's like you're transferring an abuse from this community to another. So those are some of the gaps still in the law. But even with existing law, people don't take it seriously because it's about I have the power, you don't. So I am using my power and space to be able to subject you to that form of harassment. So it is very difficult. You see, Samantha, since she came out, have you had any word directed towards her accuser? Have you had any? But what you hear about Samantha is blaming, is shame, is embarrassing her, is saying she's lying. I mean, what the hell? She's very intelligent. She has many other things to do.
Correct.
Why would she need to come out? And it's not easy. It's a trauma. What is happening around the country, all cameras on you for all those reasons. In fact, I uphold her for the courage that she has thought and finally said, let me be a pillar for others to hold on so that they can come out to report.
I am still with the understanding of sexual harassment and the definition of it, which I think for many eludes our understanding to really understand it very well. And I think that's why we are having very many incidents like this and very many victims, because the perpetrators, I don't think, really understand what sexual harassment is, and the victims as well, I don't well, they may understand, but to what level do we as human beings, as Ugandans, to what level do we understand sexual harassment? Because when we were having this conversation, you said a simple, now I know it could be a simple touch, a simple touch on your shoulder could be termed as sexual harassment.
Right.
So in literal sense, what you're telling people is don't touch each other, don't look at each other, don't say anything to each other. So the definition is, I keep saying it's wayward. Because you said, well, it's wayward for someone who wants to take a soft stance at it, but you understand where I'm coming from, because we have very many people at work who walk up behind their workmates and just tap their ear like, hey, and you know, and people move on.
What I can borrow from you that you're saying loud and clear that is true is that there is need for people to be sensitized constantly, whether it is the general public, whether it is the judges, whether it is the police, whether it is employees, for them to be able to understand what sexual harassment constitutes. That is okay, I accept. We need to talk about it more so that people awareness can be able to grow. But from a point of saying that, people will get afraid to touch, to speak, because they are fearing to be accused of sexual harassment, I do not think so. Because, do you know, if you're the accused or the person intending to harass somebody, I want to be convinced, or I am very well convinced, you know what you're up to. When somebody says no, okay, let's say you don't know what you're up to, and you come to me, you say, hey Rita, you see, I want you to come to my office at 8. I say no. Okay, why wouldn't you take it from there? Why do you have to go an extra mile and start assigning me duties that will leave me late at work, and then you want me to come to your office, then you start, extending all sorts of things. So to that extent, like Opio said, that even when people claim they don't know, when they do it first instance, they tend to make it repetitive.
Opio, when we were having this discussion, you said it's something that happens repetitively.
Yes.
That is one.
Yes.
And then two is probably something I'll ask you as well after you're done with this is, are we being a lot acceptable to sexual harassment? And you see, when it happens to people, people are a lot acceptable when someone asks you to come after working hours to their office, when someone gives you a bad touch, what you would call a bad touch. I remember it was with children growing up, they tell them what a bad touch is and what a good touch is. But first, let's begin with repetitiveness of when it becomes sexual harassment, when it moves from me simply giving Malaha a compliment every single morning to becoming repetitive. Because this is truth in honesty. Every single morning I'll look at Malaha and say, oh Malaha, you look beautiful, I like your lipstick today. And that's what I'm going to say every single morning. So if I am saying it every single morning, am I sexually harassing her?
Now, first,
because it is repetitive.
First, we talked about the issue of power relations. So sexual harassment is generally a product of power. The perpetrator is generally in a more powerful position. The victim is generally weaker. Now, the dimension from which it becomes rather problematic, when a person is inconvenienced, not even just sexually, in other ways, the perpetrator generally will know. If a lady is uncomfortable, for instance, being hugged by you, you'll definitely know. You'll try and force that hug. If a lady is not even comfortable at all, you looking at her, you'll definitely know. The expressions, we communicate as humans in various ways. A lady might not deliberately say it, but they could express it in various ways.
Mr. Douglas Peel, you are the ED of the Federation of Uganda Employers.
Yes.
Are the employers stipulated or, pretty much mandated to make sure that these laws are pretty much clear in the office, such that, even the HR goes a step further and sensitizes the employees on the same?
Absolutely.
Do you push for that?
Yes, and there are limitations to this. Rita said it quite clearly, the number of 25 for you to be able to set up a committee at the workplace to address issues of sexual harassment, but also beyond what the law stipulates. At the Federation of Uganda Employers, we generally encourage employers to promote best practices. So that means you don't have to have 25 employees for you to be able to put in place a policy. And also each workplace can define what is socially acceptable, because it's not the same everywhere. In a given workplace, people might take a more casual approach to relationship. In another place, people might be more disciplined, more focused, and approach it differently. So each workplace needs to sensitize its employees.
Does that where the FUA, the Federation of Uganda Employers, stops at? Just encouraging employers to have such, measures in place or structures in place or laws in place and sensitize the employers. Does it stop at that, or do you go a step further and monitor, especially them that are members of the Federation?
And first, we tend to offer certain specific support to employers. One of them is that we do random surveys, and these random surveys focus on quite a number of things. They could focus, for instance, on the level of employee engagement, but sometimes it does focus also on issues of sexual harassment. So we come to your workplace and actually try and check, is your place responsive?
You should start with NTV.
Yeah, we'll be happy to do that.
Let's do this. When you walked in, I jokingly said that one of my workmates has been sexually harassing me. During her speech, she says this is a gender-based violence.
Yeah.
And every single time we talk about sexual harassment, we look at the ladies.
Yeah.
We look at the ladies.
Yeah.
And we accuse the men.
Yeah.
That seems to be the stance every time we're talking about sexual harassment. Let's be honest. If we're talking about uncomfortability, that happens a lot with the men as well. There are very many times that the men are being sexually harassed, but because, well, everyone thinks men can't be sexually harassed, it's the women that can be sexually harassed. And we looking one side and blind eye to the other side, because ladies continuously wake up in the morning, dress up to impress, dress up, to make me uncomfortable at work.
Now, let me explain.
I'm not saying. No. Yes. Of course.
Dress for us.
No. I'm not saying they dress up to come and intentionally.
We dress for ourselves. We dress for ourselves.
Let's put it in this context.
Yes.
If a man ever came to the office, and many times I've had this accusation where a man's underwear is showing, and many will say, that's sexual harassment, right? When a woman shows up at work with her underwear showing, that's not sexual harassment.
Now, let me first clarify to you. Sexual harassment is not without gender only, that it's purely an issue linked to the ladies. But often, like I explained, it's an issue of power. So men generally tend to be in a position of power. Even when they don't hold real power in office, they may not be the ED, but just by their nature as being men, in society men are generally the stronger sex, women are considered the weaker sex. So that power dimension comes from the society itself, but also sometimes comes from the workplace. Now, for the men, quite often women are not in a position of power to do that to them. That's the benefit. That's
the assumption.
That's the assumption, and usually you can be surprised the level of respect in our society that could be given to a male who is not the CEO compared to a lady who is the CEO. In a social setting, the man might be considered more powerful than the lady, so that makes it easy for the men to harass the ladies.
Let's put the assumption aside. At what point, especially in the workspace, does a woman sexually harass a man? And because with women, it's not going to always come out as a touch attached to a man. It's always going to be at the look of dress code. At work. If Mala showed up, unfortunately she's not one of those people, but if one morning she showed up here and came to the office in a really short skirt and her thighs are showy, that's a position of power. And we all know the weakness that men have. That's a position of power. Is she sexually harassing her?
Now, let me explain it in a very simple manner. I've said from one workplace to another, there are parameters that are set. Workplaces, for instance, have dress codes. They have what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. Now, in a bar, for instance, if it is your workplace, that's what I'm saying. That it's acceptable for them. It's normal. Actually, they might think something is wrong. Why you dress this way?
Mr. Douglas Opio,
so that has to be said.
Mr. Douglas Opio, and I think Rita, you also take on this one. If we now, belittle this conversation and bring it down to the style of dress, does it mean that sexual harassment is justifiable, really, Mr. Douglas?
Absolutely not. There is no reason why one human being should be humiliated by another. And sexual harassment, unfortunately, is one of the worst forms of humiliation that another human being can suffer, irrespective of that, whether that human being is a man or a woman. Is generally unacceptable by any stretch of the imagination, and in no way can we belittle the matter. The consequences can be dire. Some people can totally leave their work. Some people can commit suicide. It can go to all sorts of extreme unimaginable. So it's something we shouldn't condone at all. And the more we talk about it, I think the closer we will get to a deeper understanding, and then it will cease to be an issue of definition, because we would all be conscious as to the humiliation, up to the problems that it causes the victim, and then we would be more responsible.
You know what I would want to say that, like I said, when you want to take a softer stand, You start going low that way. It
Yeah.
becomes dress, then it becomes my lipstick.
Yeah.
But that is the issue. The issue is about power. For sure, taking it outside the workplace. You know what happened in Chuli. You know what happened in Central Lens. You know all the things that have been happening. So the more people belittle, and you do not see even powerful people coming up, they like leave it to women speak.
Correct.
What happened, for instance, today we ask, where's the headmaster that was in Chuli? Even when everything was straight in everyone's face, what happened?
Even now with the story that we have running,
For
we
Samantha,
haven't had any powerful stance in this country.
Nobody. And that sends a message, probably. For me, I actually fear for the men. I'm like, is this what they want to do? Do they do it every day? No single word has been uttered by a male. I have not heard.
Right.
You're seeing women here, but also to say that sexual harassment, let the men know that when women dress, they dress for themselves.
Correct.
Like he put it. My miniskirt has nothing to do with you. You have all the power to control your emotion. You have all the power to be in charge of yourself. So it should not in any way be an argument that my miniskirt has enticed you for me. And welcome sexual advances. As long as I'm not entertaining, as long as I've said stop, just do that.
My last question as we wrap this up. When it comes to awareness, because this is where the biggest problem is. We're looking at coming to people at their workplaces and talk to them about sexual harassment. And I think the sayings in every single language you'll find all over this world is where we need to, the awareness needs to start at a younger stage, where if we have people growing up understanding what sexual harassment is, both with the boys and the girls as well, then we don't have to go to workplaces, because these are people who have already grown into it, they are used to it, it's more acceptable to them. Awareness, when it comes, when kids are growing up, they know what a bad touch is. They tell them, when uncle touches you here, that is not a good touch, come and talk to me. But that's it. That's it. When you go to schools, when you go to nursery schools, when you go to primary, well, maybe nursery they're a little too young, but when you go to primary schools, when you go to secondary schools, there is no awareness there for people to understand what sexual harassment is. And then we get to a later stage when we're at workplaces and we understand sexual harassment in a way that many would say that is putting it at a lower pedestal.
You see, when it comes to such issues that mainly affect women and girls, they become points of controversy. It is at this same table, in this TV, I believe people came to discuss the whole controversy that was around sexual education in primary and secondary schools.
Sexuality.
Yes, so people are saying, you cannot have sexual education in schools. You will spoil the children, you will do this. But you now bring out the point that that was part of the package. That children are able to grow up knowing what is it that somebody can do that constitutes a sexual harassment. Because you saw it very well in primary schools, in secondary schools it has happened. So sensitization is a day-to-day thing, but also employees out there to push for having these policies in place, but also not that, but to put them into action. But my final appeal is to the Ministry of Justice, that for sure, as the epitome in this country where everyone would want to see action take place, they should better wake up and lead by example and act in Samantha's case.
As we come to a close, now we're wrapping this up. Unfortunately, we don't have time. We're running out of time. Mr. Douglas Opio, I just want you to take this one. If, for example, like come out very vocally and say that, by the way, my employer in my workplace have been sexually harassed, and in my workplace we don't have systems or structures that have been clearly stipulated that protect me against such. Do you then, as the Federation of Uganda Employers, move a step further to revoke the membership of this employer?
We haven't had one yet, but that's essentially what would happen.
Are you saying that all the members don't have these cases?
They could be there, but the reports, there is none we have received at the moment that I can explicitly state that would warrant that, because then that member would face the disciplinary committee of the federation, and then appropriate actions would be taken.
But so far no member has been revoked.
But your clip said it rightly, that 90% is unreported.
Exactly.
So there's no way he
So it shows that there's more, you need to do more, perhaps.
So I think more on sensitization, more on implementation, more on the gaps that were highlighted also in the law in terms of policy. Let the steps be very clear. But as of now, what we have, 14 days are enough. People should be able to do something. But men out there, please, this is not a crime that you should be able to, you should be promoting.
All right. Thank you so much, Rita Chukwasa, the Executive Director of the Institute for Social Transformation here in the country, and also Mr. Douglas Opio, the ED of the Federation of Uganda Employers. You promised to up your game?
Yeah.
All right.
it's a shameful thing, really, that we shouldn't be tolerating at all.
All right, that's it for this conversation, but keep your views coming. The hashtag is Morning at NTV across all the social media platforms. This is a conversation that you need to tell your friend, tell a friend, tell a friend. We need to have these conversations. At this point in time, I'd like to link over to Miss Joyce Nakato to give us an update on the unfortunate incident that happened on Sunday, where we did have a boat, capsizing, and quite a number of people lost their lives. Unfortunately, so far we do have another body that has been discovered, that bringing up the number to 13. Joyce, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. You are in Hoima. Kindly bring us up to date with the new developments with regards to this particular matter.
Yes. Well, what has happened is that 11 bodies were retrieved from Lake Albert at Toko Island yesterday, Toko Landing Site rather yesterday. And so it brings the total number to 13.
Correct.
Because if you remember, on Sunday, 2 bodies were retrieved immediately after the accident occurred. So by the time we went to press yesterday, 9 bodies had been retrieved, but then in the course of the night or early this morning, 2 more bodies were also retrieved from the lake. Now, the police at first had been working alone with its own marine unit, but now it has been joined by the UPDF marine unit to continue with the search. Now, the big